Welcome back. It's time for your favorite show, the 9 Arts podcast. Today, Caitlyn Ryan, the Senior Vice President at Stream Realty Partners. And Caitlyn talks about preserving history through art. She gives some great examples of adaptive reuse, one that involves taking a bank vault and turning it into a wine cellar. Caitlyn really impressed me. She is a woman leading the field in a male-dominated industry, a finance savant, a boss lady, and I'm ecstatic to have her on the show with us today. Enjoy this perspective from Caitlyn Ryan at Stream Realty. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the State of the Art report, where you can learn more about art's impact on the built environment. Enjoy the show. All right. Welcome to the show today, everyone. I'm delighted to have with us Caitlyn Ryan, Senior Vice President of Stream Capital. Caitlyn, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have a leader like you to share with us some of your stories and also about your beginnings. So to kick us off, would love to know more about you, how you got to where you are, and what you're working on right now that excites you.
Absolutely. I went to college grew up in Austin, went to college at Texas Tech, and then decided to go to grad school in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins. And throughout that grad school experience, kind of got a little bit, really loved the finance side of deals. So I went into venture capital initially. And then I met somebody who was the chief investment officer of a company called Alex Brown in Baltimore. He was the one who kind of pushed me. He was kind of explaining to me real estate investments. Here's what we do. We buy hotels and, we craft. And I thought that was so cool. And so just really kind of fell into real estate. But then I decided to move back to Austin and got luckily hired by Stream Realty. And they were doing a lot of fun, creative real estate investments at the time. And I've been here ever since. It's been about 7 years now.
Well, what a journey, and certainly not one that everyone gets to go down. So I'm glad to have your perspective with us today. And when you're thinking about developing a place, could you tell us a little bit more about what goes through your mind? How do you go about it?
So it is kind of funny because generally when we choose to develop something, we're choosing to develop raw land. So initially you have to think about what you want to put there. Like, is it going to be office? What kind of office is it going to be? Is it going to be high-rise tower? Is it going to be just tilt wall office? Are we going to aim to have more conference center feel or call center? Or are we going to aim for those high-tech tenants that are looking for really specialized build outs? Austin these days, you're seeing a blurred line between both of those because in suburban tilt wall products, you'll see a lot of office tenants that are doing these extreme build outs because you're getting these companies that have a lot of money backing them. But with that, being very cognizant at first of who you're marketing to and who is going to be spending their time there, I think it kind of comes from there because as we all, if you think about office tenants, retail tenants, anywhere else, where you work, you spend the majority of your time, and almost having that seem, making sure that time is enjoyable from the time that they enter the office complex, retail complex, or industrial for even that matter, to when they exit. It's an experience and not just one of a bane of going to work every day and being in a white room and walking into the same stale lobby that you'd always went to. So
could you tell us a little bit more about some projects that you've been involved with that you think are exceptionally memorable?
So my very first project was Stream. It was in Austin, and we had purchased the whole block of 6th and Congress, which at that time was Main and Main in the downtown center of Austin. It was such a cool project. And so we had taken a bank building that was built in the 50s, had been vacant for 8 years, which is kind of crazy to think the Austin of today would have a building in the center of downtown vacant for 8 years. But when we were bidding on it, the whole city was bidding on it, including people from outside the city, but everybody wanted to tear that building down. And so we were looking at it, and my boss at the time, his name's Lance Salas, he used to work for Trammell Crow, but he was working with us, and he said, we need to take this for what it is, and we need to redo this building because it has so much character. We must have gone through 10 different mural artists or that we're just trying out to get the right mural on the very top of the building. And it's not, we had this whole blank wall, and we really wanted to be thoughtful about what kind of artwork we put there. The elevator cabs that we had were all historic photos of Austin in a not a traditional way, but so it's just when you go in the elevator, it's just kind of something you see, something different each and every time you walk into it. Um, we had like historic photos of the building and the construction of the building blown up to put in the building lobby as these really great artistic photographs. But one of my favorite aspects of that whole project was there is this amazing bank vault that is just gorgeous in its intricacy. It has, the bank door, the vault door. It's just amazing. And we chose to keep that bank vault in the basement. And it's actually a wine storage facility now. But we put glass up to kind of show right into the bank vault. And it was just kind of a beautiful standing piece of art that's always, for the history, the length of how long that building's there is going to be there. So,
well, that wine cellar sounds like a great place to have a party.
Exactly right. I'm sure there's been quite a few. There.
So that's a great example of having to really embrace existing architecture, existing culture, and use that as a attraction, right? Rather than something that you would tear down. Do you have any examples of projects that you've worked on where you felt like, or even projects that you've seen where you felt like art and culture really played center stage in defining the brand for that place?
We have a project we're working on now, which is a major street in Austin that we have been discussing in quite detail. But it's a gathering in downtown Austin of historic buildings that we're trying to think of we're trying to transition this into a place. I love working with historic buildings. I completely geek out over the history of everything, just what it used to be, the multiple different uses of how it kind of evolved to what it is now. And I think there's something really charming about when you're being thoughtful about what use it's going to be now, taking a nod back to what it was. And so I think the best way you can do that, sometimes you can't do that with architecture, and sometimes because these buildings have gotten to a place of just disrepair, you can't really do it inside, but you can do it through the artwork and the placemaking. It's always the internal discussion with real estate developers. Are you going to build a glass tower, which a lot of people like to now, which I think a lot of cities fall victim to that, of we're going to build a bunch of glass towers all at once. And then you're seeing with the evolution of technology, with our glass technology, with just building systems in general, architecture, it's very noticeable on a skyline which places are from 20 years ago and which places are from now. And instead of, you look at building materials like brick, and that you see in a lot of these historic buildings, and just limestone and all these other different materials that aren't as used as prevalently today. However, those are the ones that are so easy to make modern through artwork and through everything else. And so to give a modern spin, and the most easy to redevelop.
Do you have any thoughts on the business benefits or the goals of incorporating art and the social impact or community engagement side of things?
I think that the longevity of how long an asset is going to last is going to be strongly dependent on the art and the placemaking that you put into it initially. Obviously, especially with us, when we develop, we're working with other people's money. So we want to be really respectful of every single choice we made. There's a return on investment. And art's the easiest choice for me to make, art, sculpture, like in every different variation of art, because I think when you create like a culture, not just a building, but almost a culture within your individual development, it increases the speed of leasing. It allows for a longer asset cycle than you would normally have. Like a building that may have a 10-year tenant, but then moves out, is going to have to completely restructure itself once that tenant moves out. But if you have made yourself really prevalent as far as artwork and a culture in there, it's not going to be such a horrible transition. And it's going to be a lot easier for the buyer of your building in the future to re-tenant that for a less amount of capital investment than they would have previously.
So that's a good example of ROI. How do you think about ROI with regard to art and culture and the business side of things?
I think that you're seeing institutional capital coming into these markets, these really like institutions like Austin, that are looking for a longer hold than traditional real estate developers, REITs that we're seeing traditionally. So when like you have these larger capital groups that are buying these buildings, they're looking to have these buildings for 10, 20, 30 years. And when you're looking at a building, instead of just being like, I'm looking to lease this and then get out and make a really great investment, if you're doing that, you're not really paying attention to adding those specific extras that are going to set this building apart. To a point you are, but not to such an extent. But when you're starting to think of those people who are now building these buildings who are looking for a quick investment, the buyers of these buildings are looking for long-term investments. They're having to spend more careful consideration on the feelings of the lobby, the feelings of any green space they include, because when it has usually green space, when you're buying an acre of land and you're trying to pencil what makes it work, you're trying to really utilize every single foot of that land, especially impervious cover, as much as you can. We're seeing now the switch of let's make a slightly smaller building with a lot of green space that gives us the optionality to add artwork, to add green infrastructure, to do these large green roofs that are just like really beautiful in their serene awayness from the traditional office environment, but also a way that you can have artwork incorporated in everything else, in every single aspect, to kind of improve your investment that way and not just maximize and just try to put office wherever you possibly can.
Yeah, really thinking long term and the social and cultural impact, because if you want people to be there, right? They want a reason to come, a reason to stay, a reason to spend more time. And all of those things combined, I think psychologically can help with faster lease ups, longer tenant life cycles, and all over better brand awareness and marketing for these properties, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Especially investments that you have that, depending on if they're not just downtown and in close proximity to a lot of different art galleries or restaurants or anything else, if you're having something that's maybe a little bit farther out, it almost puts more weight on you to create your own culture within your individual development.
What are some of your favorite mixed use developments that you're excited to get back to now that the world is opening up again?
Anybody who knows me knows I am obsessed with the Dairy Block in Denver. I love that. It's like I've said, and I think there's definite it's the coin of making a great real estate investment mixed use play and doing everything right, because and it's also the benefit, right? Like I've told anybody who is going to Denver in our office and our whole entire company, they're like, where should I stay? I'm like, you have to stay at the Maven Hotel because I'm obsessed with the Dairy Block and I love the hotel and I love everything they did. I think they just did it so well. And you guys were so crucial and critical in that whole process, because I think what makes that project so special is no matter how many times you come back to it, you notice something different. When you go in that activated alley, it's the thoughtfulness of not even on the sewer grate covers or the screening for your transformers, or just everything, every single part of that development and part of that project was so carefully organized and executed. I think you get people coming back when they feel like they have a different experience every time.
Well, in your industry, I would imagine that there aren't a lot of women doing what you're doing. Do you feel like that perspective offers you a unique advantage?
I always think it does. I think that traditionally in real estate, people look at being a woman as a disadvantage, and I think it's a huge advantage. I look at it from the complete opposite way, because I think that females are extremely talented in finding ways to garner people to talk to them than maybe our male counterparts. Listening is a huge part of everything, but also I think the female perspective in real estate isn't, it just doesn't exist to a point, because it always was traditionally male dominated. And so it's interesting now, especially on the development side, as you're starting to see some of these developments come together, to have a female perspective on what they want a building to be and what they want, what retail they want to go to. Because obviously, like the amount of retail in downtown retail, you're looking at a population demographic that is majority women who go and shop there. And it's kind of funny to me that when you have that more females aren't polled, or more females aren't in our industry to say, hey, where do you guys want to go shop? If you want to come downtown, where do you guys want to go? Considering you're representing about 67% of the people who shop here. I think the perspective is lacking, and I'm trying to encourage more females out of college and just all around to kind of explore our industry, because I think it's a great option. to as far as a career goes, because it's such a fun, you get to marry a good finance with a creative side. Very rarely do you get to do that in a lot of jobs.
Are there any other trends that are happening in the sectors that you're seeing? And could you share more about what those might be?
The trend post-COVID, I think, is people are becoming more thoughtful of their developments. I think it's in an upswing, especially in the Austin market. We saw it just hit really fast. We saw Austin there was not enough buildings. There was too many tenants. The demand was way outpaced the supply. And so when we saw the increase of development, especially in downtown, all around, it was more like, let's get it out fast. Let's get it out fast. Let's build this building. And very few buildings were thoughtful about doing something different, because I think that comes when your demand and your supply are a little bit more even, that people are starting to have to invest in really placemaking and what's going to differentiate your project from everybody else's project. I think you also see a variable shift in the importance of your office atmosphere, because now that people know they can actually operate outside of the office, they have that option to do that well. So we have to kind of entice them to come back to the office. But I think you have that mix, but then you also have a great influx of people now who are just sick of being home, and they're ready to go out and they're ready to live their lives. And with that comes a lot of pressure to make sure that we're creating spaces that are enjoyable, not only enjoyable, but also safe.
What role do you think art and creative placemaking can play in enticing people to come back and engage with their communities and their spaces?
I actually loved, my biggest thing is I loved what we saw during COVID as far as the solutions people had about getting out. The fact that movie theaters that are so traditional, you couldn't go to movie theaters. So drive-in movies all of a sudden got completely, and if you look at a drive-in movie theater, it's just a nod of the best. It's the perfect example of a placemaking, because everybody was out in their cars, and there's usually some really, really great art installations all up and down, like along with it.
Murals and color.
Murals.
Yeah.
As far as from a development perspective, you also had, I think art and placemaking, you had so many opportunities if people can't be inside of a location, if they're just walking up and down streets, and just outdoor infrastructure are the most important. Like during COVID, I mean, this wasn't okay, but I always laugh about the Instagrammable events. Like that's kind of what, as the developers, we have to start thinking about as far as art and placemaking is. Traditionally you would just be like, oh, well, we love the murals, we'll put them up. But now it's just not only murals, it's Instagrammable murals that are going to bring people in. Especially during COVID, I saw, it was like probably a half a mile long. I was in Nashville and saw a line for the Nashville wings, like the wings on the outside of the building. And it was just lined up, and nobody would really want to go in to any, everything was to go, everything was that. And it was the perfect example of nobody was going anywhere. They were getting food to go. They were getting drinks to go. Nobody was sitting. But however, there was still a half a mile long line for the Nashville wings to go and stand in front of, and that piece of art. And I think that said more than anything is, people are nervous to go anywhere, but for some reason, art and culture still brings people in.
Absolutely. Something that's fun, that's engaging, that you want to come see, that feels different and unique and special to the place where you are.
And embraces something really great about that city that you don't maybe have where you're from. I think it's a great way for a city to take advantage of, and a lot of different city organizations to be cognizant of making sure that your city possesses one or two of these areas that just encapsulate just draw people in, and something your city can hang your hat on.
I think we've learned a lot from the past year going through COVID, and I'm curious to know what you've learned that you are willing to leave behind and what you want to bring with you into the future.
What I have learned moving forward is how important, not only how important art and placemaking art, is how important the draw of what people love to see as far as artwork, sculpture, like music, every single thing that art encapsulates is to bring people together. and how important that is, because I think everybody underestimated the importance of just being with each other and interacting. And I think at first we went through this whole time of, we can Zoom, it's just as good. And now everybody's really like, there's something to being in person. There's something to be experiencing, not only people getting together, but being in your environment. And I think how important your environment is to being conducive, to creative juices even flowing, to being productive, being efficient. And I've learned that a lot as well, because I think everybody kind of suffered about, you're just wanting to go outside. You're wanting to go to these areas, these parks and these art galleries and these sculpture gardens, especially in Austin, that you took for granted. And so I think what I'm leaving behind is not taking those for granted anymore, and really being very thoughtful these days about just appreciating, instead of doing a development and just moving on right away, is maybe just sitting with something and being a little more thoughtful about how it's going to interact exactly with the local Austin population.
And hopefully enjoying maybe a live concert, a picture with the Wings, and some good food and drink at the same time.
Oh yeah, everything. Yeah, no, it's live music. I will say that's a big thing I cannot wait to get back to. Just can't wait for that to be back to normal.
Absolutely. I think we're all on the same page about that. Caitlyn, tell us where our listeners can learn more about you if they're interested, and any current projects or press or websites that you might want to direct people to.
Perfect. So we have a lot coming up. One project's just in its infancy that's in downtown Austin that will, it'll be, when it kind of kicks off, I think hopefully it's going to be something really great to really contribute significantly to the art and culture of Austin. So I will say, just keep your eyes on 6th Street in Austin. But overall, we also have a beautiful 350,000 square foot office building in the corner of Austin, right across from the river, completely unobstructed views. And it's called River South. And you can see it at riversouth.austin.com, all one word. And that building not only is just gorgeous with its green space initiative. It's right next to the Trail of Austin. We always loved the tagline when we were creating it. It's an extension of the trail, completely into an office building. And so it's one of my favorite. And the building itself is a complete work of art. We had an amazing architect. His name's Brian Miller with Beck. Did a fantastic job about creating just this iconic building that overlooks Auditorium Shores, and I think it's going to be really special. So it should. We're currently leasing some the office space right now and some of the retail spaces, but also thinking about really great pieces of artwork as well to incorporate on our street level. So we're in that process, but it should be opening probably around September, October of this year.
Well, some good ones to keep an eye on. Caitlyn, thank you so much for joining us today. You're clearly an innovator in your field and a pioneer in so many ways. So really appreciate having your perspective with us. And thank you again.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it.